Hi, our exercise for today is covering slow contour. So we've already done some blind contour and we'll be moving into some other types of contour a little bit later, like cross contour. But for today, we're going to be focusing on doing a very slow, deliberate, measured drawing. And we are going to be using organic form, so it's a little bit easier to deal with the measuring. If your proportions are a little bit off, it won't be quite as obvious as it would be if you chose a man-made object. So I'm going to have you choose a plant, and I've got a few photos of simple plants. These are the kind of plants I'd like you to try to find. If you have house plants around your house, try to find ones that have very few leaves or fairly simple leaves. Some plants like ferns may just be way too complex to try to do a drawing like this. So try to find something with just a few leaves. Succulents are good. Here, I'll show you a few examples so that you know the kind of plants that might be good. This one has 7 or 8 leaves in there, maybe as many as 10, but the leaves are large and the veins are very clear and you can see the trunk of the plant. It's up to you if you want to include the planter, the pot that it's in. That's not as critical to me. The main thing is really that we're talking about the organic forms. Here is another plant with fairly simple leaves. There's quite a bit of space between the leaves, so it's pretty easy to make out the spatial positioning of the leaves, which is going to be a really important part of our drawing today, is suggesting depth in the drawing. And if you don't have any house plants, you can go outside and just clip a little branch off of a bush or tree, hopefully in your own yard and not your neighbor's yard. But it doesn't need to be an elegant house plant. It could be something as simple as this little, shriveled branch off of a plant, or if you have a basil plant that you've bought at the grocery store, something like that would work fine. But violets are really nice too because they have kind of large, simple leaves. But don't choose something that's like a spider plant that's got so many leaves that you're just going to get lost in the forms. Try to keep it a little bit simple for this exercise so that you don't get overwhelmed. So what we'll be doing today is really focusing on increasing the sense of depth in our drawing. So there will be no shading. We're going to use only line weight, and I'd like you to try to, in your finished drawing, establish at least 3 different line weights, which means you're going to have the foreground parts of the plant, the parts of the leaves that are facing closest to you. Usually it's the leaves that are on this side of the central stem, if it's a plant like this in the photograph. The leaves that are coming towards us are going to be the darkest. The plant's parts that are in the middle field are going to be a medium weight line weight, kind of your middle value. And then the parts of the plant and individual leaves that are pushing away from us on the other side of the central stem are going to be the lightest in value. And if you really want to challenge, I'd like to see if you can even transition the lines so that they gradually transition from dark to middle to light. So that's going to mean you're pressing a little bit harder on your pencil when you want the line weight to be darker. You're easing up a little bit for the middle value, and then you're barely pressing it all for the parts that you want lightest. Now, if you don't have that kind of control just using the pencil yet, you can go back into the drawing after you've gotten the basic shapes worked out and use your kneaded eraser to lighten areas that have gotten too dark. So the kneaded eraser is the stuff that looks like gray clay, and you can just, I think I have one here, you can just shape it into the shape that you need. You can make it smaller, large, and you just press really firmly on the line that's too dark, and it should lift off a layer of that graphite without smudging it. So you don't want to be smearing it around. You just want to try to, like silly putty, if any of you know what that is, press firmly on it and lift it off, and that should lighten the lines. But in the end, what we're going to be looking for is a foreground, a middle ground, and a background that's only expressed through different line weight, different darknesses of your pencil line. So I would suggest you could use a number 2 HB, Ticonderogas are good, or American-made pencils tend to have a better quality graphite than some of the cheaper ones that you might get. But if you have your HB pencil or your 2B pencil, you want it fairly soft for this one. You could do your lightest lines using your 2H, that's your harder pencil, but be careful not to press so hard that you start embossing your paper. So if you find that you just aren't getting the line dark enough, with pressure, then switch to a softer pencil. So switch from a 2H to a HB, and if that's a little too firm, switch from an HB to a 2B. So the 2B is our softest of the 3 pencils that I asked you to buy this term. I also want you to be very specific about the detail. So I want you to notice how the leaves attach to the stem. I want you to be as specific as you can about those contours where the 2 planes meet. If there are overlapping leaves, I want it to be really clear in your drawing which leaf is in front of the other. And I want you to be as specific as you can about the shapes of the leaves. So in this drawing, you can tell that even though all of these leaves have a similar kind of diamond shape, long, elongated, oval shape, because we're seeing some of them from end view, like a really foreshortened view where they're aiming right at us, the shape becomes really different. So don't think that all of the leaves are going to appear the same shape, because you're not seeing them all from a flat-on side view. Some of them are going to be at a really strange angle. So really observe the shape, take measurements, the width of the leaf versus its length, just like we did when we measured ellipses for our cylinder drawing. And another tip that's really going to help you with this drawing is looking at the shape of air between the leaves when you're measuring the placement of the leaves, and think of those as interlocking puzzle pieces that help us get the leaf shapes in the right position relative to one another. So that's the negative shape. We're going to do a whole exercise on negative shape drawings in a little while, but today I'm just kind of introduce it as a new topic there. And so let's go ahead and scan through a couple more student drawings so you can kind of see what we're looking for. I'd like you to draw large so that you fill your whole page. And I'd like you to have, again, that line weight variation. So it's up to you if you want to do any sort of line work that represents where there might be a coloring change on the leaf. So if you have some light green areas and dark green areas, you can add a contour between those 2 colors to kind of indicate where those colors change. But you're not going to be doing any smudging, no shading or hatching on these. It's going to be just beautiful, controlled line weight. They should not be real sketchy lines. When you're done, you can start with a sketchy line like I will, just to get the basic layout perhaps. But in the end, I'd like you to clean up all the sketchy lines so that we have a really beautiful, controlled, linear drawing in the end. Here's another really nice use of the whole page. This student chose a very complex plant, but you can see how much attention they paid to how the stems interlock and overlap and how the individual leaves attach to that winding stem. And we can tell by the darkness of some contours which parts of the plant and even which parts of an individual leaf are closer to the viewer than others. So on that leaf that's right in the middle of the drawing, you can see that that kind of S curve is the edge of the leaf that's closest to us. That center vein is kind of in the middle range, and then the far side of the leaf is a little bit lighter. And then this is another kind of plant as well, but a good use of the whole page. So they've ended up drawing the plant so large that they're cropping the plant off the page, which is just great. It makes those edges a lot more interesting to have something going off the edges like that. And the line work's really faint, but hopefully you can see that there are 2 or 3 different layers of darkness here. We've got the clump of leaves that's right up in the foreground, and then there's that stem that snakes back that's drawn with a middle weight line, and then behind that is another stem that's drawn with a really light line. So really make it clear to the viewer just by the heaviness of your line which parts of the leaf are closer to us than others. All right, so I'm going to slide this off to the side a little bit. This will be the plant that I'm drawing. I gave you a photograph just so you can kind of see what I'm working from as I'm blocking in the sketch here. And I won't draw the whole plant, but I will give you some suggestions on how you might get started. And then I'll tackle some of the more difficult areas where you've got a leaf, for example, that's coming right toward you, and how you might establish that. So to start with, I'm going to go ahead and you might, just with a light touch, sketch in some of the basic shapes and try to, you'll be doing some measuring with this too. What's really helpful to me is figuring out where kind of looking at the gaps of space around the leaves as you're trying to block in where they might be, and using your measuring. I've already done some measuring here so that I can work a little bit faster on the lay-in sketch. But I do want you to be measuring constantly as you go. So maybe you've got kind of a loose, slightly gestural drawing to start with to get a few basic leaves in correct proportion. And then I want you to go in, and maybe the easiest leaf to start with is the one that is not overlapping or is not being overlapped by any other leaf. So I'm going to choose the leaf that's right there in the front. It's kind of heart-shaped, and we'll plot that in first. So as we draw that in, I'm noticing that even though I know that leaf has a point on the end, from this particular point of view, that tip is curling over at us. So what's going to happen is we're going to have this little peak that cuts into the leaf here. And then the center line of that, we're seeing the underside of the vein here, but it comes over the top and becomes a continuous curve here. So usually that vein will follow an arc, and even if the leaf is folded over on us, if we can maintain that sense of that connected arc, that's going to help us quite a bit. So once you get the first leaf figured out, you can use it as your standard of measure to compare other leaves. So you're going to be measuring, width measurements, length measurements, comparing it to other leaves by locking your elbow and looking at the object in front of you. And then as we do another shape, we're looking at where that second leaf, maybe the one that's closest to the leaf that we've already drawn, where it's located. And again, do your best to try to translate that foreshortened leaf shape into a two-dimensional object. So again, we've got this kind of tricky curve on this leaf that's coming towards us. And if we think about the central vein, we're seeing the underside of it here, and then it should come across the top. So again, if we could see through that, you might even start by constructing it as if it's transparent, and then you can add more later. Now there's another leaf that's way back here. I'm going to intentionally draw that much lighter because it needs to feel like it's much, much farther away from us. If I drew it the same darkness as this leaf, it would seem to be just attached right to the top of it. And in the end, I may come back in and darken these even a little bit more, but for now I'm trying to keep everything kind of at a middle value until I can be sure about which objects are closest to us. So I know that this other leaf that's coming out to the side is kind of in the middle range. I'm trying to be a little more specific about some of these subtle curves that are in there, and I'm noticing where the central vein hits this leaf that I've already drawn. And then I'm going to come over to this side too. So we've got a leaf that appears to be kind of aiming off toward the back, so I'm going to keep that a little bit lighter, kind of measuring, noticing the shape of it, looking at the negative shapes around it to try to make sure it's going to fit next to the other leaves in the right place in the central vein. I can't quite see where it attaches to the stem, but you should be thinking about that because often you'll see a little bit more evidence somewhere else further down in the image. And then we've got a leaf up here. This one's really tricky because we're seeing part of the top of the leaf and part of the bottom of the leaf. I usually try to get that center arc in first. So I'm thinking about the vein that runs down the length of the whole leaf. And then you might notice that the front edge of the leaf crosses over that center line. And again, you may have to draw some of these a few times. In fact, I'm guessing I'm going to have to draw this a few times to get that shape just right. So try to refine it. If the curve's not quite right, just erase it and redraw it until it really looks like the way you're seeing it. And then this far side, I'm going to keep a little bit lighter since it's farther away from us. And I'm going to go even a little bit darker here, by going over that line again to try to pop that out a little bit more. Alright, so paying attention to how some of this stuff attaches, you might notice little contours here where there's one leaf attaching in front of another leaf. This one I can see there's some little bits sticking off there. So you're going to just, tackle it bit by bit. In the end though, we're going to want to make sure that the leaves that are closest to us are darker than the parts that are further away. So this tip of the leaf is closer to us than even this part where it attaches to the stem. So as I transition down, I'm going to try to ease up on the pressure of my pencil so it's not quite as dark here, and then maybe darken that vein that goes across the top and correct that a little bit more too. All right, and then this one I see. Again, try to be as accurate as you can with where those veins are. You can draw in the other ones if you want to lightly. I'm barely touching the paper at all on that part. It's quite a bit lighter. Here I'm going to go slightly darker on this one since it's closer to us than that edge is. And you just, again, continue to work your way down. This leaf is kind of tricky here. We've got quite a bit of information going on in the stem there. But to do, we've actually got two leaves here. So one is closer to us. It's one that we see almost from side view. Got a little bit of a crimp there. And then just take your time figuring out, the part of the leaf that's close to us. And then this part, I think we're seeing the underside of the leaf. So I'm going to draw a little bit less pressure there so that it recedes. And then again here, there's the back side of the leaf. And the only way the viewer knows that it's farther away is because I'm using a little bit less pressure there. And then there's a second leaf behind it that's not quite so foreshortened, but I'm going to draw it lighter so that it doesn't seem quite as close to us. And there's a center stem there. So bit by bit, you're going to capture the whole plant, or at least, spend a couple hours working on a single drawing. If you get done with one, you can work on a second one. But I'm looking for this drawing to take you about 2 hours to complete. So again, I'm kind of speeding through it so that this video doesn't take forever to get through. But you really want to kind of work deliberately and slowly. This leaf that's in the middle range, it looks like the front edge of the leaf. A little bit closer to us. So then to go back in, once you decide which leaves are farthest from you, you can lighten them up with your kneaded eraser. Clean up any smudges that are on your hand that have gotten onto the paper before you turn it in. And then be sure to take a photograph of your actual plant from the exact same angle that you used when you drew the plant so that I can compare the shapes and see how it's going. But again, this is kind of a quick, there's still quite a bit more to draw on here and clean up, and I'd spend quite a bit more time trying to analyze what's going on with this central stem and how the leaves, some leaves develop and grow out from other parts of the stem. So using contour lines to show which parts are overlapping other parts is really important here. All right, I'll leave it there.